Hi, my name is Youngbin Yoon, and I'm here today to tell you why it's morally wrong to assume I'm good at math. We have a lot of philosophy to cover in not that much time, so I'm just going to jump right in. I think it's kind of a bold claim to say that it's morally wrong to assume I'm good at math, so I want to start with something that might be a little bit more intuitive. Imagine that you're in a boardroom with the CEOs there, there's maybe a couple of project managers, etc. And you look around and you realize everyone in the room is a man, except one woman who's sitting, I don't know, maybe next to the CEO. As everyone's talking about this meeting, about trying to solve some problem, the woman makes a suggestion. And no one really takes up the idea. Maybe it's even a really good suggestion, but no one takes it quite seriously. Maybe 5 minutes go by, and the CEO makes the exact same point. And suddenly everyone goes, what a great idea. Wow, such brilliance. I think in this case, the woman has been wronged. I think she has been morally wronged. And I think this is a pretty clear example of something I want to be talking about today. One more case, if that didn't do it for you, is let's say that you are walking down the street and you see someone who's being robbed. And you go up to the police officer at the next corner and you go, excuse me, sir, I need your help. There's someone on the next corner who's being robbed. And let's say in this scenario that you are a black man, and the police officer does not believe you, because going down that corner to that street, maybe it's a little dangerous area, so he doesn't want to trust you, and he doesn't believe you quite exactly because you're black. I think in this case you have been wronged because you are not being taken seriously because you are a black man. I think these are two very intuitive ideas that many people would sign up for. And I'm going to argue something along these lines today. But before I do so, I need to cover a lot of terminology. And this is where I want to give credit where credit is due. This is Miranda Fricker. She is a philosopher and professor in New York City. And she's the woman who is credited with giving philosophers the conceptual tools we need to talk about cases like this. So let's start with credibility deficit, which is the first thing you see right here. When we've been talking, they'll go back to that boardroom, the woman, and go back to that street on New York City, let's say, the black man. They're both not taken seriously. They're not being taken seriously as subjects of knowledge, people who transmit knowledge or ideas. That is what we call a credibility deficit. They're not being taken seriously. They're being undermined. And it's important to note that it comes from an identity prejudice. So the woman is not being taken seriously because she is a woman, not because her idea is bad, not because she's not fit for the role, but because of her gender, some sort of identity that she holds. The same thing is true of the black man. It's not that his testimony is bad for some other reason other than the fact that he is a black man. It's important to know that the role identity prejudice plays because not all credibility deficits are problematic. For example, you know me as a philosopher because I'm up here talking about philosophy. But if you misheard me and said I was a florist and I started going something really deep in philosophy, you might go well, why should I trust this man? He's a florist and maybe not well educated in philosophy. So you would be giving me a credibility deficit, but it wouldn't be problematic. So the identity prejudice plays a deep role. Now, I've talked a few times about the idea of it being disrespectful to them as a knower. And this, I think, is one of the more intuitive points. Something that goes back in philosophy a long way, at the very least to Aristotle, is that humans are rational beings. Something that makes us human, something that's essential to humanness is our rational capacity, our ability to reason. It's because we have that I can be in this room today talking to you about all this. You don't see any cats doing this, and if you do, please let me know. I'd love to see it. So it's disrespectful to something that's very human. To not believe the woman, to not believe the black man, is to disrespect them in something that's essentially human. So let's just take stock of what we've just covered. To not believe someone on the basis of identity prejudice is to undermine them in their rational capacity, in their reasoning capacity. And that's something that makes them essentially human. You are dehumanizing them. You're treating them as less than human. You're undermining them in something that makes them human. And I think all of us would agree that's deeply immoral. That's deeply problematic. Now, all the cases we've been talking about involves not taking someone seriously, a credibility deficit, as we've said. I'm here to talk about assuming I'm good at math. That would be a credibility excess. So what am I doing here? Fair question. right before I move on to that, I want to give credit where credit's due once more. There's another professor and philosopher named Emma Davis, who, incidentally, also works in New York, and I come from New York, so I don't know what New York's doing here, but I think we're doing something right. She also argues that credibility excess can constitute an injustice, a moral wrong, in the same way that Miranda Fricker has argued. I'm going to also be arguing that credibility excess constitutes a moral wrong, but I want to give credit to the other people in the literature who've made similar points. Now off to my point. Consider this following case. A diligent Asian student working really hard, studying maybe even hours a day. That's how you know I'm not talking about me. Studying hours a day, working really hard at calculus, let's say. And she goes to class one day, and then the professor asks an extremely challenging mathematical question. The room goes silent, no one has any idea, we've all been there. And as she's sitting there and just thinking, she's starting to see a pattern, she's starting to figure it out, she's really thinking, and then finally she gets it. She gets the answer, and then she puts her hands up and she's happily and confidently about to answer, and then a well-natured classmate from the back goes, of course the Asian gets it. And that's a joke that oftentimes many people feel comfortable saying. I'll say for myself, that's a joke I've received before. But the Asian student, she hears it, she laughs, she answers the question, she's right. And then the class goes on. But the student feels a little belittled, a little frustrated, a little undermined even, let's say. And let's dissect this for a second. I'm proposing here that she has also been undermined in her reasoning ability, and it's because of a credibility excess. But let's run through it. Credibility excess, was that given? I think so. We assume that she was good at math. That is, in fact, giving her more credibility because she's Asian. And that's normally considered a good thing. You're good at something, so it is an excess. Was it an identity prejudice? Again, I think so. Why? Because it was given to her because she was Asian. If she were white, for example, she would not have been given this credibility excess. So I do think there is the link to identity prejudice present. Is it disrespectful to her as a rational agent? I think so, and this is perhaps the key part of my argument. You are falsely misattributing to her racial identity what properly belongs to her reasoning identity. So instead of giving to her what the credit she deserves in light of the reasoning that she's done, the hard work she's put in, you give the credit to her identity. And I think that's disrespectful and undermining of her rational agency. The rest, I think, follows. I don't see a difference why rationality in this case disconnects from humanity, so I think that follows, and therefore we're still undermining her in her humanity. So I think that it's wrong to assume it's morally wrong to assume I'm good at math because it's disrespectful to my very humanity. Thank you. I've been great.